Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Aarna, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. On today's episode
of mine. So I wanted to be present for my children, and yet I still wanted to do the kind of work I loved. So starting a business allowed me that flexibility to do so. And of course, this was all before remote work was a thing. So, we're going back a little ways, but the point is, crafting what's right for you. Again, going back to my earlier point, but if you chart your own path and you don't let other people tell you, well, you have to do it this way, just challenge that, approach these ideas with some critical thought about, will that work for me, or how can it work for me, and how can I best get to where I want to be?
Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Aarna, host of Aarna's News, where on this podcast channel, I aim to eliminate the gender gap in the STEM fields by featuring inspiring female professionals and highlighting their stories and accomplishments to further encourage girls. Today, I am pleased to announce our guest, Gina Wilson. Gina is a holistic executive coach and author and founder of Systems Strategies Consulting and Coaching. Formerly a software developer and healthcare strategist, Gina coaches healthcare professionals and tech industry leaders using evidence-based practices to foster peak performance, well-being, and success. She also coaches college students and those transitioning to college from high school. Gina draws from her graduate studies and research in cognitive psychology and her experience developing medical software, consulting for healthcare systems nationwide, and her belief in the power of behavior to transform us into agents for our own success and well-being. She has published 2 nonfiction books, Skills That Build, The Hard Science of Soft Skills for Work and Life, and Fearless First Year, a student guide for college transition, success, and well-being. Her latest book, Silicon Valley Ease, a fictional tale of a young woman who shakes up the tech industry in the early 80s, spotlights themes of imposter syndrome, women in tech, and workplace challenges that still exist in today's workplaces. So thank you so much, Gina, for being here today. Before we dive into the questions, would you like to introduce yourself?
I think you pretty much covered it, Aarna. Thank you for having me. But I did want to add, though, that your listeners can follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. I often post information that they might find useful. So I just wanted to throw that in.
Awesome. So my first question for you is, tell us a bit about your career path.
Sure. Well, my first job was working as a computer programmer for a large insurance company. And this was mainframe computer programming using COBOL. Going back a ways, and I found I was in that job for less than a year, and I found that insurance really wasn't my passion. So I took another job, and that was with a company called Shared Medical Systems. It was aligned with my interest in healthcare. So I had been an EMT before in college, and I really had an interest in healthcare. So for Shared Medical Systems, which is actually now Oracle, I was writing computer software for hospitals and healthcare systems. And I traveled the country. I installed systems. I gathered requirements for new products. And I just really, really enjoyed that. At the same time, I was going to graduate school at night for cognitive psychology. And I kind of put together the idea of the brain and computer model before it was really a thing. But I felt an understanding of, how we think as humans could help me in my understanding of, writing software. So after I graduated, I then went on to take a role as an IT director for a healthcare system. And I grew the department from being primarily just having a billing computer system to having a full suite of clinical products. And so we automated everything: radiology, laboratory, nursing, virtually every ancillary department in the hospital. And it was fantastic. We kind of brought them into the computer age at the time. And I left that job to start my own business, System Strategies, primarily to address the need for custom software. And I was consulting with healthcare systems and either helping them select a vendor's software or creating any kind of software to bridge gaps that were left between purchasing individual systems. And of course, it's the precursor to today's electronic medical record. But I found myself in that job doing a lot of coaching informally, in coaching tech leaders, in coaching the hospital executives. And so I decided to formally get training and become certified through the ICF as a coach. And so now I am primarily doing coaching and writing. I found in my coaching that I wanted to reach more people. And so I did that by writing a few books addressing some of the challenges my clients are facing. And so now I do primarily writing and coaching.
I mean, I love that. Like your journey started with multiple facets. Like you did a lot of things that you enjoyed and then they took you different places. So I love how like you continued your passions
Mm-hmm.
wherever you were. And I think that's really, really fun. Yeah. So my next question for you is what advice would you give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours? And do you have any tips to succeed?
Sure. So I guess my advice is to be open to opportunities as they present themselves, and always to keep your values and your interests in mind. As you can see, if you follow a prescribed path, it may not really align with your interests, right? And as you can see from my path, it wasn't really a prescribed path. I kind of went a very circuitous route to be doing what I'm doing. But by keeping in front of me, what I wanted to do and what interested me and what energized me, um, I felt that I could, take advantage of opportunities and kind of create my own opportunities to do that. So my advice is to create a path that works for you, right? And everyone's unique, so their path is unique, right? It can be unique. And so I think it's really important to recognize in yourself what you're looking for, what you'd like to do. And maybe it's not the way everyone gets to that point, but follow your heart and follow your passion. And I think that'll help you have a satisfying career and enjoy what you're doing, which is it's ultimately what it's all about.
Absolutely. And I think what you said is really important because like when you enter like the workforce or something, you kind of feel like you have to do what everybody else is doing because that's what like society tells you to do. Like as a student myself, who's like going to be applying to colleges like this year, which is crazy to think. Like it's scary because society has told us that okay, we should try to get a high paying job and then whatever that might be, you just have to do instead of like things you actually care about. But just like remembering that that's actually not true. You should like it's your life. You should do whatever you want. Um, just because society might tell you that, okay, that's like the more popular path, it doesn't mean that it's the right path or it's the one that you should take. And just
Mhm.
like keeping that in your mind because sometimes we kind of forget that, okay, I can do whatever I want, I have free will. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like something that we should always like keep in mind.
Right. I think it's so important to set standards of success for yourself, right? Don't let others define what success really means. And so, I'm not saying don't pay your dues. It's true of any profession. You kind of have to start with the basics. You put in your time, you get kind of pay your dues. You do the prescribed um, channels for a while, but that's really just to get yourself grounded, and it also will inform you going forward. What did I like about that? What didn't I like? And so you can start making informed choices, and I think that's really key. Make choices for yourself based on what's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, like make choices that are just right for you. And I think that's a really important point to also just set your own standards because as I said before, like it's really easy to like lose ourselves
Mhm.
when we are starting to follow like the general path. So if you
Mhm.
like remember that okay, by this time frame I want to do this and don't be distracted by what other people might be doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty important.
Sure.
And my next question for you is, what is a common myth about your profession that you want to debunk?
I'll just talk about software development to begin with, because I feel like there's a very common myth that it's best suited for those who are introverted. And I really want to dispel that myth, because I feel like, at least in my case, an empathy for other people and how they're doing their job and what kind of barriers they are facing in their work, that helps me listen to them and understand what was needed from a computer system, right? So rather than just being heads down writing code, if you really have an understanding of other people and how they're using the computer or the systems, it really goes so much further than, doing what you think is best, or, writing the best code, but maybe it's not solving the right problem, or maybe it's not streamlining the workflow. So I think it's really important that a developer or someone in tech has an understanding of the people who are going to be using the products they create. And doing that, I think you can't really be introverted. You have to really be out there. You have to be listening to the industry. You have to be listening to your clients or your potential customers. And you can't really do that in a very introverted fashion. It really requires some of those soft skills, some of the people skills, as well as the technical skills. So if you can bridge those, I think, really does dispel the idea of a developer who's, very introverted, working by themselves, kind of in a back office somewhere. I really think that's a myth that we need to kind of squash at this point.
No, yeah, I totally agree. I think a main reason why that's a myth is because of the media. Like, in so many TV shows, they always portray like the very nerdy guy as someone who's the only person who does computer science. So like that's how I genuinely thought that was like the field, because when I was a little kid, I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. But then like I slowly learned that like computer science and STEM is not for introverted people. Like it's not only for introverted people, it can be for like so many others. It can be for ambiverts, extroverted people. And then I like realized that, and then it's like so sad because some people still think that it's only a place for introverted people. Um, but it's really not. Like as you said, if you're making products for others, then you gotta have the soft skills, you gotta have the technical skills, and you have to bridge them. You kind of have to have like both of the flavors in order to actually make your product work. Because when you're like catering for people who aren't in your like background or in your similar place and you don't know who they are, you got to reach out to them and you got to ask them what their needs are. So you have to do a lot of like background research and have like the soft skills to actually like do that. While also, as you said, bridging the technical skills. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, I think, in my case, and I realize it's a little different nowadays, but in the early stages of writing software for products that really didn't exist before, I got to shadow people in their jobs, and I felt that that was really illuminating. Okay, so I was, say, a nurse for a day, or followed a physician around, or I sat with a registration clerk, or I followed a pharmacist as they were filling medications. So through kind of taking on that persona of that role of the person that you're writing code for, it really helps you empathize with what pain points they face and what they really need, and so it helps. It helps in brainstorming new ideas. It helps in really streamlining their work and solving problems for them, so that they can really do what they need to do and let the computer do all the other stuff.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. And I love how you like shadowed different places and you actually got like you actually did the research. I think that's really cool.
That was a fun part of the job. I loved it. I never really had to pick a profession, right? I just like followed other people through theirs.
Love that. Um, and yeah, so this is a great segue to my next question, which is if you could step into my shoes or younger self, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't?
I guess I'd ask myself things like, what is it that truly makes me happy? What do I like doing? And what are my top values? Because once I answered that for myself, I either found work or created work aligned with those, right? So I knew I liked problem solving. I really liked being around people. I was interested in health. So, when if you were to plug those factors into a computer, I don't know what, um, I have no idea what it would suggest as a profession, right? So, you just kind of have to go with what's important to you, right? And you figure it out, and how you can combine those facets into your line of work. You'll feel like you never work a day in your life because you're pursuing your passions, you're doing something you like, you're interested. It's not considered real work. You don't have to force yourself. And if you do that, then you can really feel like you're just going about your daily life, and it happens to involve creating a product or working in an office or doing something, a meaningful type of work for you, something that's meaningful for you. And so I write about this in one of my books, Skills That Build, about values based prioritization. So once you define your values, that can really be the litmus test for how you spend your time, how you spend your energies, right? So you can kind of let everything else fall by the wayside and focus on those few things that are really important to you. And in doing so, it aligns your energy and your time with what really matters most. And I think that's the advice that I would really say. Just follow that, keep that front and center, even if that means, putting it on your screensaver or posting a big sign on your mirror in your bedroom. Wherever you can keep that front and center, that'll help keep you focused in the direction that you should be going.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I think something that can help with like the values is something called like ikigai, which is a
Mhm.
Japanese concept where
Mhm.
basically you put in like a box of four like make quadrants and you
Mhm.
kind of like prioritize what your values are based on like the things you enjoy,
Right.
what are some like skills you can actually like deploy in the real world. And I think being able to like maybe put your values down that way could also be helpful because sometimes it's hard to be like, okay, what do I enjoy? What do I want to do? And if you can
Mhm.
get these like all put into like some quadrants, and that can also be helpful. And as you
Mhm.
said, just like place your values or on like a piece of paper or something that you can see every single day.
Mhm.
So then you actually like remember like, okay, this is what I want to do. That's like my goal for today or something like that. And that way you stay on track.
Mhm. Exactly.
All right. And then my next question for you is what are the best resources or books that have helped you find your career path?
Gee, that's a tough one because for me, I feel like reading a wide variety of books helped expose me to what's possible in the world. So I wouldn't say any one book gave me, the direction to head, but it expanded my view of the world. So when I first started my career, a book that was really popular was called In Search of Excellence by Thomas Peters and Robert Waterman. And it left a big impact on me because it was a lot about how uh, big companies are successful, like, the Disney's and McDonald's, and what really made them tick. And a lot of it had to do with listening to the customer. And so it left a really big impression on me in terms of why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I doing this type of work? Why am I creating this kind of product? So that was a big impression on me. And also there's a book by Ayn Rand. It's called Atlas Shrugged. It's a really big, thick book. But I loved that book because it really developed in me this idea of professional integrity. Because some of the main characters in that book were really driven by what they do well. And I think that helps anyone be successful, no matter what their field is. If they're doing that well, then they are, kind of just living their passion. So those books particularly left an impression on me. But also, I want to say that, today's books would be inspirational, especially for young readers. Like that book called Educated by Tara Westover. She had overcome this hardship of never being formally schooled as a child, and she went on to be an Oxford scholar, and she, she writes about her wanting to learn, and I think that's very inspiring. It's a great story. It's a memoir, actually. And then there's a book called Reading Lolita in Tehran by Azar Nafisi, and that one really is very inspiring because it's these people who really had a desire to learn, and they had to learn in a very kind of covert environment, um, and so that was inspiring too. There's another book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's by Daniel Kahneman. It's one of my favorites. Talks a lot about decision making and the human brain and how we arrive at conclusions and how we think, and talks a lot about cognitive biases, which I think everyone needs to be aware of. So that's a really great book. And one of my favorite books is called Flow. It's by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's recently deceased, but he wrote about that whole idea of following your passion and figuring out what it is that we do that really inspires us and energizes us and restores us. And if we make time to do that on a regular basis, we can develop, cultivate a feeling of well-being. And whether that's in your work or outside of your work, the idea being, just keep that a regular part of your life. So maybe you have a really difficult job. It may not even be a job you're terribly interested in, but let's say you're a musician on the side and you play the piano or you're in a band. And so if you're doing that sort of thing on a regular basis, it can sustain you when you're going through difficult times. So I really, really like that book. It's called Flow. But just keep reading, keep reading, keep reading, and a variety, because that exposes you to what might be possible outside of the sphere that you may be familiar with already.
And I think like what you said is really important. I mean, I love the books, and it's just that to keep yourself open to whatever you might see, because like if you're reading a book and you don't actually like take in the information, like you don't actually like soak it up, then
Mm-hmm.
you might like forget or you might miss out on something. But if you actually keep yourself open, then you might be like, oh, okay, that learning lesson is cool. Maybe I should apply that in whatever facet it might be. And
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, you can like learn from that.
But even fiction, you can learn from the characters, and there's been a lot of studies talking about how we can develop empathy by reading fiction, because we start to identify with the protagonist, let's say, and we start to feel for them, and maybe it's in a totally different culture, different environment, or different line of work, or what have you, different period of history, but you have kind of you take on their troubles, right? And so by doing that, we can develop empathy. So I feel like fiction, as well as a how-to or a nonfiction book, can also be very, very illuminating.
Absolutely. And my last question for you is what do you think is a vital factor that shaped your career? What was your life before learning it, and what was your life after learning it?
Hmm. Well, I'd say not letting other people define what I could be. I think that was the biggest factor in my own personal success. I feel like I found out that the prescribed or traditional paths, when I was young, was there weren't that many options for women, let's say, and the paths to success were very limited. So when I decided that those really weren't right for me, I charted my own path, and I just pursued the education I wanted. I crafted my career in a way that was satisfying and allowed me to balance it with my family, and it was aligned with my values. And I feel like it allowed me, especially starting my own business, it gave me some flexibility with when I worked. I feel like, my clients didn't really care if I worked 9 to 5 or all night. They were looking for results. And so for me, sometimes that meant working at night or on a weekend or something like that. But I still had the option then to pick up my kids from school or go to a game or take them to piano, that sort of thing, be present, which was an important value of mine. So I wanted to be present for my children, and yet I still wanted to do the kind of work I loved. So starting a business allowed me that flexibility to do so. And of course, this was all before remote work was a thing. So, we're going back a little ways, but the point is, crafting what's right for you. Again, going back to my earlier point, but if you chart your own path and you don't let other people tell you, well, you have to do it this way, you just challenge that, approach these ideas with some critical thought about, will that work for me, or how can it work for me, and how can I best get to where I want to be?
Absolutely. I love that. Like, don't listen to the naysayers because
Mm.
if you do, then, well, oh well. But I mean, if you don't, then you've kind of charted your own path and you've done the things that you enjoy, and you probably won't end up with any regrets if you do the things that you want to do. So yeah, just remember that like your future is pretty much in your own hands, so just do whatever you want.
Yeah, I feel like um, the lesson here is that, we have agency as individuals. We don't really have to, follow a prescribed course. We can make that course. We have choices, and especially as a young person, you have so many choices nowadays. So it's a tough job to figure out what choice to follow or what choices to make. But what if this is something I tell my clients, nothing is really permanent, right? So if it doesn't work out, then you pivot and you change course, or you make a different, go in a different direction. You make a new decision about how you're going to go. So nothing is really cast in stone. That if you make a mistake, then just learn from it and move on. And so I think that's an important lesson to learn. Is like, try everything if you can, and try it early, and let that inform your choices going forward.
Absolutely, 100% agreed. Well, thank you so much, Gina, for being on this interview with me. Before we end off, do you have any last words to the audience?
Well, I do have a couple words, and that is just, make sure that if you are interested in, what we talked about today, you can follow me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I post a lot of information, particularly on LinkedIn. I like to share um, inspiration, from things that I've learned or people I've come across. So be sure to do that. You can always contact me through my website, GinaMWilson.com, and you can also, you know, ask me questions through the website too. If there's something we haven't covered today that you're interested in, or if you want to ask me about my books, I'd be happy to do that. And for women interested in tech and young people, I think my new book, Silicon Valley East, would be really something you might enjoy, because it's about a young woman in tech, and some of the choices she's had to make, and how it affected her personal life, and some important decisions that lay ahead in her quest to work in tech in the early 80s. So it's a retro romp, so it's kind of fun, set in the old days, but it also shows you, what might be possible, and again, help you develop that empathy and expand your view through reading.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gina, for being on this interview with me. I absolutely love talking to you.
Thank you, Aarna. I really enjoyed it.
Thus, that concludes today's episode. If you want to know more about how I relate to these amazing topics, then stay tuned for upcoming episodes. A free way to support this show is by leaving it a 5-star rating and a review on the player you are listening to. Let me know what you enjoy about this podcast, as it's a chance to tell me what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it too. Once again, thank you for finding me, and I hope we stay in touch with each other. Dito, you're listening to Aarna Sahu, the host of Aarna's News. Toodles!